Well, welcome back to Thesis Academy. This is still video 2, but it is now part 3, looking at diagnosing these situations, these contexts of ministry. Let's go ahead and jump into part 3. Again, the goal was to facilitate finding a project. And so far we've looked at Young Church USA. That was the first context that we've analyzed. We looked at Community Christian School. That was number 2. And now we are ready for number 3, which is the Leadership Institute. And so let me go ahead and just start by reading about this one. Grace is a powerful force in her community. The person's name is Grace. She sees a need for leaders in her community. There are a number of problems in her community, including a lack of investment, poverty, consistently lower scores on educational assessments, dropout rates, drugs, violence, crime. It's basically the worst part of town in the city that she's living in, and although there are many churches in the area, there are so many persistent and consistent problems. Grace sees a lot of groups do transactional things, building homes, money, outreach. Things get done, but really it continues to be the worst part of town, and it just has a reputation, and it seems that many people are stuck in poverty and they don't get out, and there's almost generational problems in this neighborhood. Grace has worked with churches in this area to kind of focus on this. She's opened up her own home. She's worked with schools and after-school program working with kids. And Grace feels the real target area should be youth. So instead of getting into questions and kind of developing our theories, we're going to take this one a little bit differently. Because there are so many problems, and Grace is connected to so many of them, the problem of ministry would be absolutely too huge to stop here. But we're going to go with the more opportunity model, which means that we're going to go on Grace's hunch that there's something that she wants to do to invest in youth, and she believes it would be to start a leadership institute. So we are not starting from the very beginning looking at a societal problem. We're kind of taking a couple steps in, because honestly, there is no doctrine of ministry project you can do to fix a total society ill situation. But Grace, having done a lot of work, feels that a leadership institute working with high school, college age youth to invest in them in leadership and servant leadership would be a wonderful project, and that this will and ultimately transform society. That might be a very large ideal and one that she might not be able to see the end of in her lifetime, but that is still probably the right aim, that she feels like investing in people relationally to become leaders who multiply would be a great way to solve some of the ills in this part of town that she's working in, and so that's what she wants to do. So, from the opportunity model, we now have to figure out, well, okay, what is her problem of ministry that she's trying to solve? Because solving poverty, violence, bad educational scores, lack of investment, or people doing transactional things for this part of town is probably not something she can solve, quote unquote, but she can choose to make a difference in this area. So, taking her Leadership Institute idea. Let's now start with questions she should ask, or questions, that you should ask. What would you want to know more about to kind of give direction to Grace and her desire to form a leadership institute in this area? What are some questions we might want to know more about? Yeah, I think some questions that we could ask about are there other kinds of things being done like this in this area? Is this a model that's worked well in other poor, low-income neighborhoods? Really, how long is this experience in a leadership institute going to be? Who would you recruit, and what would you have? What expectations would you have for those graduates? How is this really going to pan out? Investing in people makes a difference in the lives of those people, but if you saw this as having broader effects, how are you really going to achieve those? And so, there might be in essence an investigative TP here. Can you guess it? What would be a good discovery or an investigative TP kind of working alongside Grace's desire to have a leadership institute? What would be maybe some of the investigative things we would want to dig down on? Yes, similar to some of the things I've mentioned, are there other models that Grace should study? Maybe Grace should kind of temporarily go investigate leadership institutes really within her state or region to see which ones are successful and why. Have they formulated good partnerships with city government or churches? You know, how maybe there's a way to multiply the effect by bringing churches together to do some of the investment in people and discipleship and leadership development. Is there a curriculum that is really successful? An investigative TP might study other models for the purpose of maybe doing an experimental one where Grace gets to do some pre and post measurements with the particular participants, or perhaps she could probably measure a few other things as well. What would an experimental TP look like for a leadership institute? So at this point, this thesis project should seem a little different than the first two. The first two started really with some kind of contextual problem that they either want to investigate or try to fix. This one is a little bit different because the problems are so many and so vast that Grace is coming at it with something she really wants to do. She's already has it in her heart that she feels called to do a leadership institute, and she feels this will work towards society ills. And so we really didn't get into too much about what would a discovery look like. I mean, I asked the question and we saw some, but basically Grace already has it in her mind that this is what she wants to do. The challenge with a thesis project like this is getting the problem of ministry clear, because you can't fix all these things, even if in your heart you believe that a generative leadership institute could fix a lot of society ills, because you're going to focus on discipling them, you're going to focus on them becoming servant leaders. And I mean, the vision is huge, but for a thesis project, it needs to be very clear, and it's got to be a lot more narrow, because you're going to need to develop a problem of ministry that's solvable by your project. And so your problem of ministry could be that there is a lack of investment in youth, but then you would have to prove that. How do you know that's a problem? Are there statistics about this? And if so, is your investment in maybe 10 or 15 of them as a thesis project where you invest in them for over the course of a year, is that going to demonstrate that you're fixing that problem or that this is an effective method? And if so, how would you demonstrate that? You know, and what are you going to measure? So this is a very worthwhile project. It's something wonderful to do, tackling such a huge issue. But when it comes to actually doing this thesis project, we're going to need to find ways to get it straight and clean. But this is a third context. This is a wonderful kind of thesis project that you might see of somebody kind of taking on a large topic, but wanting to do something very specific and trying to find a way to back up and think about, what is the problem of ministry? How am I going to measure, and what would it look like? All right, that's context number 3.